that this scripture scholar said that the end is in the beginning and the beginning is in the end. And so in Genesis 3:15, which you might say is the beginning, when our first parents fell from their state of original justice and committed the original sin, God brought all those participants in the original sin together. He brought Adam and Eve and the serpent, and he gave, of course, Adam his penance. He was going to have to work by the sweat of his brow. He gave to Eve the fact that she's going to have to give birth to her children with labor pains. And he said to the serpent, on your belly shall you crawl, and dirt shall you eat all the days of your life. I'll put enmity between thee and the woman, between her seed and yours. You shall strike at her heel, and she shall crush your head. Now, modern scripture scholars like to change that and make it he, because they say, well, Isha can be he, she, or it. But it's interesting that St. Jerome, when he translated that from probably text that no one else has had since then, because a lot of things were destroyed when the Muslims invaded and destroyed the great library of Alexandria and Egypt and different places, that the whole point of that passage, Genesis 3:15, is that it's a parallelism. He says, he's talking to the serpent, I'm going to put enmity between thee and the woman, between her seed and yours. You shall strike at her heel, and she shall crush your head. In other words, he's talking about the serpent and the woman and her seed and his brood. So it's going to be always in that kind of relation. Don't change the pronoun in the middle of the parallelism. The whole point is it's I'm going to put enmity between thee and the woman, between her seed and yours. You shall strike at her heel, and she shall crush your head. And that passage, of course, Genesis 3:15, we already see in the beginning is the end, and in the end is the beginning. Because on the back of the medal, we have not just the cross and Calvary, we also have the 12 stars, which remind us of the woman of Revelations 12. You know, the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. And what is interesting is that when Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared way back in 1531 to Juan Diego, and when she manifested herself on the tilma and said, go present yourself to Bishop Zumaraga, that he recognized immediately Our Lady of Guadalupe as the woman of Revelations chapter 12, because being a good Franciscan, he heard St. Anthony of Padua talk about Our Lady as the morning star, and he said that Our Lady is the full moon, because the full moon it doesn't have any defect. But he said a horned moon is a sign of the evil one, because it's lacking. And so notice that Our Lady of Guadalupe is standing on a horned moon. She'll crush his head. That horned moon under Our Lady's feet is a sign of her standing on the serpent. And of course, the Aztecs, they worshipped the stone serpent, and part of that had to do with the moon. They were doing human sacrifice because they thought if they didn't sacrifice human beings, there wouldn't be another phase of the moon. So whenever the moon started to dim, that's when they started sacrificing people, especially because they thought this was going to keep the moon happy, you might say. And so that's why it was such a horrible, diabolical religion, the Aztecs, is that it involved so much human sacrifice. But Our Lady came, and they called her the Guadalupe. Sounded to them, to the Indians, it was Quetzalcoatl or something like that, but for the Spanish, it sounded like Guadalupe, which reminded them of a shrine of Our Lady in Spain. But the title of Our Lady of Guadalupe is she who crushes the stone serpent's head. So that in that beautiful way, Our Lady knew how to take both cultures, both the Spanish and the Aztec, and she both proclaimed the gospel to both of them at the same time in this image. The Indians understood and could read the symbolism according to their culture, and the Spanish, of course, being Franciscans, recognized immediately Our Lady just by this beautiful image of Our Lady on the Tilma of Juan Diego. So Our Lady has always been throughout history, and this priest says that this scripture scholar said that the end is in the beginning and the beginning is the end, also said that Genesis 3:15, if you know Genesis 3:15, you know all of history till the end of the world. In other words, that's being played out every day, every year, till the end of time. The devil is working against Our Lady, trying to strike at her heel, and at the same time, she's going to crush his head. So that we see this this drama being played out throughout all of history. And so already we hear a reference to Our Lady's Immaculate Conception in Genesis 3:15. One of the first biblical proofs is that the fact is that he says to the serpent, I'll put enmity between thee and the woman. This enmity is a constant state of being. It's not that at some point, but there always will be at loggerheads with one another. And that means that Our Lady will never, ever be an ally to the serpent, that there'll always be at odds. And so that means that our first parents, because they committed the original sin, became a certain sense allied, or even you might say in bondage to the serpent. That's why Christ had to come and free us from the bondage of the serpent. But his mother will always be at enmity with the serpent. He'll never have any control or any influence or any kind of pact. They will not be friends. They'll always be in a constant state of battle. For the Franciscans especially, we see in that Apocalypse or Revelations chapter 12 that the reason that many fathers and doctors of the church say that the test of the angels was would they accept the incarnation? And that's kind of very clearly spelled out there in Apocalypse or Revelations 12, and then it talks about the woman and the child, and that the dragon is trying to go after the woman and the child. And then he says something very interesting, John the Apostle. He says that war broke out in heaven, and Michael the archangel had a war with the dragon, and the dragon and his court were cast down out of heaven. So first you have the picture of the woman and the child, and then a war breaks out. And many fathers and doctors of the church, and especially within the Franciscan school, see that that even for the angels was that they had to, their test was, would they accept the incarnation? And some of the fathers said, well, of course, Lucifer and his companions, they would accept Christ as their king because he would still be a divine person. He would not be a human person. He may have a human nature, but he was a divine person. Even though he'd be lower than the angels in his human nature, he would still be God. And they could accept that. But what they couldn't accept is that the mother of the king would be their queen. And so that meant that Our Lady is the queen of the angels. And so when the Lucifer and his companions said, I will not serve, it meant they will not serve the woman who would be the mother of the king or their queen. And they were cast out. And that's why if even when exorcists ask the demons who they hate the most, they can't even say her name. They say, it's that woman. It's that woman. The one that they refused to accept from the very beginning when they had their choice to make themselves, you might say, the instruments and the servants of Our Lady. That's why they lost their place in heaven. And so it's interesting because when you look at it that way, since God presented his plan of the incarnation, you always wonder, well, why, if Adam's the head of the human race, why did he go after why did he go after Eve first? Because he knew that the child would be born of a woman. And so if he got Eve on his side, which, once she ate of the apple, he probably said, oh, I'm such a smart little devil. I just messed up God's plan, because in his mind, she must be the woman who's going to be the mother of God's son in his human nature. And that's why God says to him, no, you got it wrong. I'll put enmity between thee and the woman. This woman, Eve, is not the woman. She's just she's just the first woman in history, but she's not the model for all women. My mother, that's coming down the road. Realize that he didn't succeed where he thought he did. And so therefore, he was always looking for this woman throughout history. Even when he heard Isaiah tell the prophecy that the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and he shall be called Emmanuel, he was looking for this virgin, this young virgin who would be the mother of God. And he probably, when he saw Our Lady appear, which we refer to Our Lady especially as the Immaculate Conception, the dawn of our salvation, because once she's in the picture in human history, now the Son of Justice can come. And so when the Immaculate Conception took place, and the devil was looking for this woman throughout history, he must have saw this beautiful little girl who, for him, she was like a fortress. He could not get into any place to tempt her. She was a solid fortress against him. And he probably began to think, when I look at this little girl, I get a headache. I wonder if she's the one. And then she does something very curious. He knew that she was a virgin, but then she goes and gets married to Joseph. And he said, well, that can't be it, because who would ever be a virgin and get married and remain a virgin? So he took his eyes off of Our Lady for a moment. And St. Bernardine of Siena says that was the first vocation of St. Joseph, was that he threw the devil off Our Lady's trail. Because the demon, the serpent, heard Isaiah 7:14, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son. But he never thought that she would be a married virgin who would remain a virgin. He said, oh, that's not going to be, because now she's married to St. Joseph. But he didn't have any concept of the fact that these two would maintain this virginal relationship, even as a married couple. So that sometimes you hear people will say that Our Lady was an unwed mother, and that's not true. It's almost blasphemous to say that Our Lady was an unwed mother when the angel Gabriel came to her. And the reason why some people think that is because they said a virgin betrothed to a man named Joseph, but a virgin betrothed is not like engaged. It means already they are espoused. That in the Jewish culture at that time and in their ceremonies, there was two parts to the wedding ceremony. There was the first part where you exchanged the marriage vows, and you were therefore, I take you to be my spouse, my husband, and you take me to be your bride, and you are married in the eyes of the Mosaic religion. You are married, your husband and wife, at that point when you exchange your vows. But they had not yet come to live together, because, like all those ancient cultures, the bride had to prepare and bring with her all that she would bring to the marriage. You might say her dowry. She needed some time to collect those things and then bring them to her husband's home, and then they would now live together as husband and wife. And at that point, people then presumed that they would then consummate the marriage, but Our Lady and St. Joseph never intended to consummate the marriage. They only intended they truly gave their rights over each other, but instead of to use those rights, they were to protect and preserve their virginal chastity. I've heard that Our Lady even made that vow long before when she was first put in the
Yes.
temple
Yeah,
as a
that's
young
right.
little girl, maybe by the age of 3 or 4. She had always wanted to be the servant of the Mother of God, but she didn't think she was worthy to be the mother of the Messiah. She was so humble. And that's why in her time, that was unusual for someone who wouldn't a woman not wanting to have a child, because for them the greatest honor would be to be the mother of the Messiah. And so that's why it was such a curse for a woman to be barren or without child, as they thought, you must be cursed by God because you won't even have the opportunity or possibility of becoming the mother of the Messiah. And Our Lady didn't even think she was worthy of even thinking of such a thing. And so she
That's
had
right.
made a vow of virginity because she wanted to serve that mother, that woman, and her son. And
Exactly.
that's, of course, the humility is what, of course, attracted God to her. And he wanted to be wanted her to be his mother. So that is, this whole history of the Genesis 3:15 being played out.